Shortly after 5 a.m. on April 18, 2016, a member of the Camp Gladiator fitness class that was to meet that morning at the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas, made a gruesome discovery. The instructor set to lead that morning's session, 45-year-old Missy Bevers, was lying lifeless inside the church with multiple puncture wounds to her head and chest. Missy's probable killer was captured on surveillance footage inside the church, but as of early 2025, that person has never been identified or apprehended, and the case is still unsolved. Hello, and welcome to Box in the Basement podcast. I'm your host, Arlene.
And I'm Leah.
In 1996, my world was shattered when my uncle Leon Laureles was shot execution style in a small town in Texas. To this day, his murder remains unsolved, and the pain of that injustice continues to haunt me, my family, and Leon's friends and coworkers. Here at Box in the Basement, we want to shed light on the overwhelming number of unsolved murders and disappearances here in Texas and beyond. We want to bring awareness to the lesser-known cases that got little to no attention, in hopes that someone listening will come forward with any information, because we strongly believe all lives matter. Ultimately, we want to get justice for Leon and for all the victims whose cases are sitting, collecting dust in a box in a basement. Please note that this episode contains depictions of violence that some people may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Please like and follow our pages on all social media platforms for Box in the Basement Podcast and Justice for Leon Laureles. And now you can also find us on YouTube.
2016 was a doozy. The Zika virus swept through the Americas. President Obama became the first U.S. president to visit Cuba since 1928. A gunman killed 49 people at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. And an attempted coup in Turkey designed to overthrow the authoritarian regime failed. Simone Biles dominated the Rio Olympics. Pokemon Go took over everyone's smartphones for a short time. The Chicago Cubs won their first World Series since 1908. And Harambe the gorilla captured the public's attention after grabbing a young boy who fell into his enclosure at the Cincinnati Zoo. Work by Rihanna featuring Drake topped the Billboard Hot 100 the week of April 18, 2016, and Cole Swindell topped the Hot Country charts with You Should Be Here. The Jungle Book was number 1 at the box office that week, and Harlan Coben's Fool Me Once topped the New York Times bestseller list for fiction. Midlothian, Texas is located about 25 miles southwest of Dallas. White settlers entered the area in the early 1800s, but growth was slow until after 1846, when treaties between the Republic of Texas and local indigenous inhabitants opened the region. The Peters Colony, a British-American land grant company, encouraged Americans to move to the area that is now Ellis County, and settlers started trickling in, building homesteads, trapping animals, and trading with indigenous residents. As with many of the cities and towns we've discussed in this podcast, Midlothian really took off after the railroad came through, and the city was officially incorporated in 1888. Today, Midlothian has about 36,000 residents, and that number would have been around 26,000 in 2016 when this crime took place. It is the center of the cement industry in North Texas today, and there is a sizable steel mill as well. It's largely a commuter town, however, with its residents traveling to nearby Dallas for work.
Terry Leanne Strickland, known to her family and friends as Missy, was born on August 9th, 1970, in Graham, Texas, to parents James and Norma. She grew up in Jacksboro, Texas, with her brothers Clifford, who Missy called Bubba, and Clint. She was a happy, popular kid who was known for her ability to make friends and make people feel included. She graduated from Jacksboro High School in 1988 and eventually ended up at Tarleton State University in Stephenville, Texas, where she graduated in 1995. She worked retail for a few years after graduating, and during this time she met a man named Brandon Bevers, who she would marry in 1998. Missy returned to school and got her teaching certificate, allowing her to teach special education classes for several years until her first child, Hannah, was born in 2001. Missy elected to stay home with her daughter, and the couple would welcome 2 more girls in 2003 and 2007. But Missy always kept the possibility of returning to teaching open in her mind. According to her family, she was a great mother who saw to her family's every need. She was happy, fulfilled, and was an encouraging partner and parent. And she poured herself into everything she pursued. After her 3rd child was born, Missy got interested in fitness and fitness instruction. And as with everything else she did, she committed herself full force, eventually becoming an instructor with Camp Gladiator, which is a boot camp style fitness class. In April of 2016, Missy and her family resided in Red Oak, Texas, which is about a 20-minute drive from Midlothian. She was hosting her Camp Gladiator classes at the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, where she offered a 5 a.m. session. Rain was forecast for the morning of April 18th, 2016. So Missy announced on her Facebook page that 5 a.m. classes would be held inside the church as opposed to outdoors. Missy arrived at the church at around 4:30 a.m. to begin setting up, and her students started arriving shortly thereafter. But there was no sign of Missy. Her car was in the parking lot, but she wasn't anywhere to be seen, which was highly unusual for the friendly, engaging instructor. One participant walked inside the church just after 5 a.m. and stumbled across Missy's body and called 911. Missy, unfortunately, was already gone by the time first responders arrived at the scene, and the official narrative is that she died of blunt force trauma. But the only murder in that area recorded in the FBI's database from that time period is listed as a gun-related death. Police are keeping many details close to the vest, so please keep that in mind.
Here's where your skin might start to crawl a little bit. As the investigation began, police found that several windows in the church had been broken, and there were tool marks on a door, which is likely how Missy's killer gained entrance to the building. There were security cameras in the church, and the footage revealed an intruder inside the building beginning shortly before 4 a.m., so probably about 40 to 45 minutes before Missy showed up and started prepping for her class. The person in the surveillance video is dressed head to toe in tactical gear resembling what you'd see an urban SWAT team wearing. A helmet, dark clothing, a vest that said police on it, boots, shin guards, gloves, face covering, the works. The person in the video was seen walking around the building, checking doors, opening cabinets, looking into rooms, and even breaking an interior door with a hammer at one point. The person captured by security cameras is not very big. Estimates range from 5'2" to 5'8" tall, and they walked with a limp, and frankly just looked awkward walking around in all that riot gear. At one point, you can see the intruder leaning against a wall for support. You can't see the perp's face due to all the gear they're wearing, and investigators still haven't even been able to determine if this intruder was male or female for the same reason. At first, investigators theorized that Missy was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Perhaps a robbery gone wrong when Missy showed up and thwarted the thief's plans. CCTV footage from a sporting goods store near the church caught a light-colored 2010 to 2012 Nissan Altima or Infiniti G37 in their parking lot at 2 a.m. that morning, about 2.5 hours before the murder. That car drove around slowly in the parking lot, parked briefly, and then departed. It should be noted that the church did have exterior security cameras, but they were offline the morning of Missy's murder. So all the footage investigators have came from inside the building. The robbery gone wrong theory quickly fell apart as investigators began to dig into the Bevers' life and more evidence came to light.
Investigators determined fairly soon after Missy's murder that nothing of value was missing from the church, so it probably wasn't a robbery. The intruder wasn't caught on camera holding or carrying anything other than a hammer at any point. While some churches indeed keep items that might have value, sound or video equipment, musical instruments, donations, or tithes that might be in a safe or a lockbox, computers, that kind of a thing. But nothing like that was missing. So then law enforcement began to wonder if this was a targeted killing.
As we go through the next few details, again, please keep in mind that we are trying to stay as close to the information available from the official investigation as we possibly can. This is a case that has been overrun by amateur sleuths from Reddit and Facebook, and there are tons of rumors and red herrings out there to wade through. We'll discuss that in detail a little later on, since it relates directly to the true crime community and the work we do here on our podcast.
So, as I implied a few minutes ago, Midlothian, Texas is a fairly safe community that isn't used to dealing with violent crime. The local police department was fairly out of practice when it came to murder investigations, and this would lead to some criticism and scrutiny by those amateur sleuths we mentioned a minute ago. Desperate for answers, law enforcement released the security camera footage in hopes that someone might be able to identify the person in riot gear seen in the church. Police instructed the public to pay special attention to the way the individual walked. Notably, the fact that the person was limping and favoring their right foot or leg. This person's feet also pointed out, and I've seen it described that the suspect has a, quote, feminine sway. I don't know what that means.
I'm a butch lesbian, don't ask me. I do think that's a really weird characterization given the amount of gear this suspect was wearing and the fact that they were limping and walking unsteadily at one point. I think cops are assuming that because this person isn't very tall, they must be female and they're trying to connect the dots. Feminine Sway is my new band name, though, for sure.
In any case, this play ultimately backfired, as the police were quickly overwhelmed with tips from the public, few of which that had any relevance to the case. Police also got security camera footage from a sporting goods store down the road from the Creekside Church of Christ that showed a 2010 to 2012 Nissan driving past not long before Missy was killed. Investigators and amateur sleuths alike have picked apart this footage, but nothing has come from it so far. At least nothing that has been released to the public. Investigators started digging into Missy's personal life and made some interesting discoveries. Police got hold of Missy's phone and found evidence that she'd been having intimate conversations with someone on LinkedIn, though details of those exchanges and who they were with have never been publicly released. A friend of Missy's also revealed that Missy had been getting strange messages on social media from an unnamed male just a few days prior to her death. Details on this piece of information are also being withheld from the public. Missy was fairly active on social media, particularly Facebook, and she often posted about her fitness class. Notably, Facebook is where she announced the change in location from 5 a.m. boot camp class on April 8th.
I am big on advocating for safe social media posting and internet browsing in general, but this is one of those tricky situations. On the one hand, posting where you'll physically be at a particular date and time is risky. Someone can track you down. On the other hand, this was Missy's job. She needed to keep her clients informed of the venue change. At the same time, if someone is intent on finding you, they're going to find you, regardless of what you post on social media in this day and age. So it's ultimately a matter of personal judgment. I've seen some victim blaming here in this regard, and I don't think that's fair at all. Like I said, this was Missy's job. If this was a targeted killing, then this person was probably going to track her down regardless. The boldness of doing this in a church building that was about to be full of people leads me to believe that this perp was bound and determined to kill Missy.
18th. Missy's autopsy was done within 48 hours, and like we said earlier, the official narrative is that she died of blunt force trauma, even though you can look at the FBI's statistics that show the only murder in or around Midlothian at the time is due to a gunshot wound. So that remains a bit of a confusing piece of the story. Forensics teams examined Missy's truck, and they found her purse, her tablet, her gun, and some other personal belongings. It didn't appear to have been disturbed in any way. So the first person police interviewed and cleared was Missy's husband, Brandon Bevers. He had a solid alibi for the time frame Missy was at the church, so he wasn't considered a person of interest. He was in Mississippi on a fishing trip that morning. Brandon told police in his initial interview that he didn't believe his wife had any enemies and wasn't involved in any drama or conflicts that might shed some light on her death. During the interview and subsequent investigation into the Bevers' marriage, police discovered that the relationship wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. Despite Brandon's claims that everything was fine, the official narrative states that the Bevers were under financial stress, though Brandon denies that and said that they were good money-wise. There were questions looming about possible infidelity. However, which we kind of mentioned earlier in the flirtatious LinkedIn messages Missy was supposedly taking part in. Apparently, there was an extramarital affair earlier in the marriage, though I don't have any specifics. The affair surfaced in 2014, and according to Brandon, the couple had decided to work through things together and stay married. That being said, Brandon is very protective of his wife's image, even after death. He has repeatedly expressed his frustration with how Missy's story is portrayed in the media, and gets upset when it's treated like a salacious romance novel instead of a serious crime that remains unsolved. And I empathize. When there is a bit of scandalous or controversial information in someone's story, it's the tendency of the media to try to capitalize on that. It's a double-edged sword. Controversy generates engagement, which exposes more people to the information and increases the chances that someone may come forward. But, at the same time, it sucks for the family and friends of the victim to see information that may or may not be relevant or even true to be blasted all over the media.
And that's why we pointed out the existence of pervasive rumors on this particular case. We almost always try and consider the sensible theories and solutions floating around, but we do our best to try and steer clear of the tendency to sensationalize. This case has generated tons of interest within the true crime and amateur sleuth community, and it's actually been harmful to the investigation and the family. Yes, I will be the first to admit that it is interesting to comb through police reports and news articles in order to find information and tell a story. But telling a story with the ultimate goal of keeping a victim in the public eye in the hopes of solving a case or urging someone to come forward is different than selling a narrative to turn a profit or get your own 15 minutes of fame. People have doxed Brandon Bevers, they've come up to family members on the street, and they've started rumors and social media posts that have thrown a monkey wrench into the family's lives. At one point, some online sleuths decided that Brandon Bevers' father resembled the unknown assailant in the security video from the church and went to social media with their theories.
And this is a weird instance because it turned out that Brandon's father, Randy Bevers, did take a bloody shirt to the dry cleaners just a few days after Missy was killed, which of course piqued everyone's interest. Brandon's father had an alibi for the morning of the murder, however. He was in California on business, and it was later determined that the blood on the shirt taken to the cleaners was canine blood. It turns out that the elder Bevers broke up a dog fight and took one of the dogs involved to the vet, which meant he got blood on his shirt in the process. He has cooperated with investigators fully, and to my knowledge, he's never been looked at as a person of interest.
Well-intentioned people can make connections and find quote-unquote patterns that may make sense to them, but don't really have any bearing on reality. And I'm not saying we're exempt from that bias or questionable decisions here at Box in the Basement. I do have formal training in research in structured analytic techniques and critical thinking, but that doesn't mean I'm trained in criminal investigations.
In some cases, these amateur sleuths, bloggers, and podcasters have nothing but good intentions. They just want to help get answers for the family and bring justice for the victim. But in other cases, it's a matter of ego and even greed. In this case, there's a $150,000 reward for information that leads to a conviction in Missy Bevers' murder. That is a hefty sum of money that is definitely bound to draw out some unsavory characters willing to cross the line to get information from the family and dig up whatever dirt they can. Ethics be damned. But aside from all the rumors and innuendo, police did eventually land on two persons of interest that have been made public. April Sandoval was someone who was actually targeted by social media sleuths. She attended a few Camp Gladiator classes with Missy Bevers in the spring of 2015, but stopped going after about a month. Somehow, internet investigators landed on her as a possible suspect, probably from some pictures she'd shared on social media of the classes she attended. She's small in stature. She had a record, albeit a nonviolent one. She was struggling financially, and she'd shared some posts concerning a far-right anti-government militia on social media. Her mother also owned a silver 2013 Nissan Altima, which closely matches the vehicle caught on the sporting goods store surveillance video. And there are some articles that say she had recently injured her right foot. Midlothian police received tons of calls and emails about April Sandoval, so they decided to bring her in. Police questioned her and determined she wasn't involved, and they went so far as to issue a statement to the public warning them to leave April Sandoval alone. People just couldn't let it go. They were convinced April was the perp, and they once again took to social media with their opinions. Things got so bad, April actually tried to file harassment charges against some of these internet investigators.
Yeah, this is an example of going way too far. This poor lady was having a rough time in life anyway, and then you get her all mixed up in this high-profile investigation. We are all for getting the public interested in these stories, obviously, but there's a line that gets crossed sometimes. Going from being a good citizen to being a pain in law enforcement's ass and interfering with their work and diverting resources and manpower from viable leads is a whole different story.
In 2019, an anonymous tipster led investigators to a former police officer named Bobby Wayne Henry, who still owned all of his tactical gear from his policing days, who also attended services at Creekside Church of Christ and walked with a limp. He also drove a car similar to a vehicle witnesses spotted leaving the church parking lot after Missy's murder. This was not the light-colored Nissan or Infiniti we discussed earlier. This is a different vehicle. This lead fizzled fairly quickly, though. Henry is 6'1", which is quite a bit taller than the person seen in the security footage. He also had a solid alibi for the morning of the murder, so he was eventually ruled out. We would also later find out that the quote-unquote riot gear the perp was wearing in the video wasn't real. The clothing was a costume and the other gear was makeshift, not official gear that would be issued to a real cop.
So what happened to Missy Bevers? We are now nearly 9 years into the investigation, and there has been very little movement. Let's do a quick recap of the timeline just to make sure everyone's on the same page. At 2 a.m., security cameras at a business near the church caught a light-colored Nissan Altima or Infiniti G37 driving slowly around the parking lot. We don't know if this is connected to the case, however, it is an odd coincidence. At 4:16 a.m., Missy Bevers pulled into the parking lot at the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian. At 4:18 a.m., Missy exited her vehicle and walked towards the church. At the same time, the intruder inside the church can be seen walking around and carrying a hammer on CCTV. At 4:35 a.m., the first boot camp participant pulled into the parking lot, but this person stayed in their car. At right around 5 a.m., 2 911 calls were made regarding Missy's attack inside the church.
So, police seemed pretty insistent in the opening months of the investigation that not only was this a targeted killing, but Missy Bevers either knew her killer or knew the person who set up her murder. Investigators narrowed down a short list of telephone numbers that exchanged messages and or calls with Missy in the days leading up to her murder. And they believe that she actually spoke to her killer not long before her death. Like we've both said, the police have been keeping certain details about this crime pretty close hold, so we can't even speculate as to who might be on that short list of persons of interest.
Investigators have stated that they thought the murder might be connected to infidelity or jealousy coming from outside the marriage. The assistant chief of police in Midlothian admitted that they had been looking into a love triangle scenario, perhaps a jealous lover, an angry spouse, that kind of thing. But less than a year into the investigation, that same assistant chief admitted that the love triangle angle wasn't panning out and seemed to indicate that investigators would be widening the net. They were open to exploring the possibility that this was not a targeted killing, which does way more than widen the net, in my opinion. Now you're looking at crimes of opportunity, wrong place, wrong time, robbery gone wrong, that kind of thing. It honestly fills me with a sense of dread just thinking about it.
Police seem to have come back around to the idea that this was a targeted killing in the years following that interview with the assistant chief. There just isn't a whole lot of new information being released to the public. The real question is, who did this? Was it related to the creepy messages Missy's friend showed investigators? Was it related to an extramarital affair, or at least some extracurricular activities? Was it related to someone that we, the public, have no clue about? We just don't know. And honestly, given the amount of heartburn amateur sleuthing has caused, it's not really appropriate to speculate about who. We simply don't have enough information that's been made public.
And I don't blame police for keeping things close to the vest. Look what happened when they released the security camera footage, and the way amateur sleuths have been acting around this case. I made the mistake of perusing some of the online true crime message boards just to see for myself how crazy it had gotten, and good lord. I realize a lot of it has been scrubbed since 2016 due to how out of control the amateur sleuthing got, but there are still some pretty inflammatory and unhelpful, even borderline slanderous threads hanging around out there. There's asking a question in good faith about a detail that may have been overlooked, and then there's desperation. And I wholeheartedly agree that the $150,000 reward is a driving factor in that. That ain't chump change.
Exactly. In any event, I tend to side with law enforcement at this point, or at least the current opinion of law enforcement. That is, it was a targeted killing. The suspect is caught on video shortly before Missy's death. This person seems to be making a show of opening doors and closets and cabinets, making it look like he or she is looking for something, but it seems staged. It's almost as if they're taking their time just waiting for Missy to show up. I can't say I believe that the car spotted in the sporting goods parking lot a few hours before Missy's death is related at all. My gut tells me it's a coincidence, but who knows? And we also have evidence that Missy had been receiving some uncomfortable messages from an unknown person. She had revealed as much to a friend in the days leading up to her death.
Quick question here. We've been operating under the assumption that the killer was caught on video rummaging through rooms in the church before Missy died. But what if they did this after they killed Missy in order to make it look like a robbery gone wrong?
I think that's a valid point. We know that there was unreleased security footage that showed Missy heading toward the church as early as 4:18 a.m. The perpetrator was caught on camera trashing the scene at around 4:30 a.m., and the 911 calls from her clients came closer to 5 a.m. If the perpetrator killed her closer to 4:18 a.m., then he or she would have had time to make it look like a robbery, attempt to cover their tracks, trash the crime scene, survey for any evidence left behind, that kind of a thing. At least create some confusion.
The fact that the intruder was covered up with fake riot gear leads me to believe that maybe they were aware that the church had security cameras, or they were at least preparing for the possibility. So again, the amount of pre-planning that went into this does tend to lead me to agree that this was a targeted killing. Would someone hoping to steal some electronics or money go to the trouble to obscure their appearance so well? You'd think they'd just get in and get out as quickly as possible. But, as we know, there are a lot of dumb criminals out there, so who knows? And that amount of tactical gear isn't easy to move around in if you don't have a lot of experience doing so. I remember once I had to do laundry in my flak vest, helmet, gloves, and wearing a drop holster when I was deployed to Iraq. We had an increase in attacks on our base, so we were required to wear all of our shit anytime we went outside our living quarters. It's awkward to maneuver with all that crap on, even if the gear is largely fake, as we're assuming here. There may or may not be a picture of me on social media of me hanging half in and half out of a washing machine because I couldn't reach the bottom of the drum wearing my flak vest. So I'm thinking in this case it was worn to obscure as many physical attributes of the perp as possible.
And if this was a targeted killing, dressing up as a cop is a good way to get your intended target to trust you and get physically close to you if you can't catch her by surprise. On a related note, the person inside the building in riot gear may well have been someone hired to kill Missy. We get caught up in the images we see of hitters in movies and TV shows. Some steely-eyed, square-jawed professional with a six-pack, a slim-fit suit, and a high-end handgun with a suppressor on it. In and out in 30 seconds. But in reality, a gun for hire could be a sloppy person in fake SWAT gear with a limp and a hammer, random acquaintance, friend of a friend, drunk you met in a bar. Real life isn't the movies. Go take a listen to some podcasts about solved crimes where a hired gun was used. Unless you're dealing with organized crimes or serious wealth, it's always some dude basically hired off the street or someone's disgruntled brother-in-law.
That's a very good point. So do we think there's any chance that this wasn't a targeted killing, that Missy was just in fact at the wrong place at the wrong time?
Of course, that's always a possibility. But in my opinion, and I'm stressing that this is just my opinion, this was intentional.
I tend to agree. At one point, as we already covered, police did open themselves up to the possibility that it might not have been a targeted killing, but we just don't have a ton of information to go on, and that is by design. For the sake of being thorough and fair, I will acknowledge that it is possible that this was a matter of wrong place, wrong time, and that the perp didn't intend to kill Missy. Perhaps it was a disgruntled church member who just wanted to make a mess. Maybe it was indeed a robbery gone wrong or vandalism gone wrong. The person panicked when they saw Missy, and the rest is history. I don't think it's fair to completely rule out that possibility, but like you, I have my doubts. From the little bit of information we do have, it seems entirely too coincidental that a vandal or thief would just happen to be in the same quiet, small-town church at the same time Missy held her regularly scheduled and publicly advertised fitness classes. These classes were normally held in the parking lot, from what I've been able to gather. That morning's 5 a.m. session was moved inside the building due to inclement weather. And again, it's a church. It just seems like a weird location to try and rob to me. Not to mention, it was pouring rain that morning. Like, why would you bother? If your intent was just to knock some holes in the drywall or steal something, why would you do it in the middle of a thunderstorm? Couldn't that wait? I don't know. It all just seems way too weird.
What about the claims that this could be a woman?
I mean, it's certainly possible. If the perp is really on the shorter side, then that's a distinct possibility. I know they brought in a forensic podiatrist to analyze the gait and movement of this person in the video, but even they weren't able to determine for sure one way or the other. I think people are overthinking that angle, but that's just my opinion. You're going to walk awkwardly when you're wearing that much extra shit on your body, especially if you're not used to it. And if the person in the video truly had an injury that was causing them to limp or favor one side, then they're going to be even more awkward, unsteady, and uncoordinated. I think whoever did this went to great lengths to disguise themselves, the gear, the face covering, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were faking the limp and the unsteadiness just to further hide their identity. I don't really have an opinion either way other than yes, it is possible that it could be a woman.
If you have any information regarding the April 18th, 2016 murder of 45-year-old fitness instructor Missy Bevers at the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas, please contact Crime Stoppers of Ellis County at 972-937-7297 or the Midlothian Police Department Criminal Investigation Division at 972-775-7634. We are excited to announce that we are now a part of the Darkcast Network. Please like and follow our pages on all social media platforms for Box in the Basement Podcast and Justice for Leon Laurelis. And now you can also find us on YouTube. If you like what you hear, please do us a favor and subscribe, like, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It would help so much, my lovelies. Also, please share this episode so we can bring awareness to these lesser-known cases so we can reach more people in hopes that someone who may know something will come forward. I'd also like to ask that you sign my petition for my Uncle Leon Laurelis' case to be reopened and reviewed with fresh eyes. And you can find our petition on change.org. Also, visit our website, justiceforleon.com. You can also join our email list to stay current on developments on Leon's case and other cases we cover as they happen. Thank you for joining us. Be kind. Later, Gators.